The 19th of March 2011. Tripoli, Libya. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi stands before cameras announcing his grand vision. A gold-backed African currency called the dinar, designed to unite 53 nations and break Africa's dependence on the Western financial system. He has accumulated 144 tons of gold. He has the support of neighboring states. He has a plan to demand gold payment for Libyan oil, roughly 1.8 million barrels per day, directly challenging the currency that has dominated global trade for decades. 7 months later, Gaddafi is dead, dragged through the streets by rebel forces backed by NATO airstrikes. His gold reserves vanish into the chaos of civil war. The African dinar dies before it ever breathes. Now, here is what most people never consider. Was this simply a dictator meeting his end during the Arab Spring, or was this something else entirely? Was Gaddafi's fatal mistake not his politics, but his direct assault on the most powerful financial system ever constructed? If you have ever wondered why no nation, no matter how powerful, seems capable of truly breaking free from American financial dominance, you are about to understand a mechanism that operates in plain sight, yet remains invisible to most observers. And if this kind of deep financial history resonates with you, consider subscribing to Infinite Wealth Historian, because what we explore here is just the beginning. Comment below. Do you believe any nation can truly escape the dollar system, or is the trap already permanent? To understand the prison, you first need to understand how the walls were built. Rewind to July 1944. The world is still at war, but 44 Allied nations send delegates to a remote resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to design the post-war financial order. The agreement they produce is elegant in its simplicity. The US dollar becomes the world's reserve currency, pegged to gold at $35 per ounce, and all other currencies peg themselves to the dollar. Why America? Because by 1944, the United States holds approximately 70% of the world's monetary gold reserves. The war has devastated European economies, while American factories have grown rich supplying the conflict. The dollar is stable, backed by gold, and backed by the most powerful military and industrial complex on Earth. For 27 years, this system works. Global trade expands, economies rebuild. The dollar is as good as gold because legally, it is gold. Then comes the 15th of August, 1971. President Richard Nixon appears on television to announce what his administration calls a temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. Foreign nations have been exchanging their dollars for American gold at an alarming rate, and the reserves are draining. France alone has demanded conversion of over $150 million. Nixon's temporary measure becomes permanent. The dollar is now backed by nothing tangible, no gold, no silver, nothing you can hold in your hand. Every economist expects the dollar to collapse. Instead, something far stranger happens. The dollar does not just survive, it grows more powerful than ever before. How? The answer arrives 3 years later in a secret agreement between Washington and Riyadh. In 1974, President Nixon dispatches Secretary of State Henry Kissinger to Saudi Arabia with an extraordinary proposition. The United States will provide military protection and weapons to the Saudi kingdom. In exchange, Saudi Arabia will price all of its oil exports exclusively in US dollars and invest its surplus petroleum revenues in US Treasury securities. The House of Saud agrees. Other OPEC nations follow. The petrodollar system is born. Consider the trap this creates. Every nation on Earth needs oil. Industry requires it. Transportation depends on it. Modern civilization runs on approximately 100 million barrels per day. If oil is priced in dollars, every nation must acquire dollars to purchase oil. This means selling goods to America or to other nations holding dollars. This means maintaining dollar reserves. This means parking those reserves somewhere safe, and nothing appears safer than US government debt, backed by the taxing power of the world's largest economy and the military strength of a global superpower. By 1980, foreign nations hold approximately $120 billion in US Treasury securities. By 2000, that figure reaches $1 trillion. By 2020, it exceeds $7 trillion. Today, it approaches $8 trillion. These nations are not holding treasuries because they love America. They hold them because they have no choice. The dollars they earn from trade must go somewhere, and the treasury market is the only pool deep enough to absorb such massive flows. Here is where the trap becomes inescapable. Imagine you are China. You have accumulated approximately $760 billion in US Treasury holdings. You are frustrated with American monetary policy. You watch the Federal Reserve print trillions of dollars during crises, diluting the value of your holdings. You want out. But what happens if you sell? If you dump hundreds of billions in treasuries, you crash the market for US government debt. Interest rates spike. But here is the cruel irony. A spike in US rates triggers a global financial crisis that damages your own export-driven economy far more than it damages America. Your factories close. Your workers lose jobs. Your own financial system, still dependent on dollar-denominated trade, suffers catastrophic stress. The very act of escaping the dollar destroys you faster than staying trapped. This is not theory. This is mathematics. China's treasury holdings represent approximately 3% of their GDP. A 15% loss on those holdings during a disorderly sale would cost them roughly $34 billion in direct losses, plus incalculable damage to their export markets and financial stability. The prison has no doors because the prisoners themselves hold the keys but cannot afford to use them. The United States has also weaponized the infrastructure of dollar dominance in ways that make escape even more terrifying. The SWIFT system, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, processes approximately 42 million messages per day, coordinating virtually all international bank transfers. It is headquartered in Belgium, but operates under heavy American influence. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, American policymakers proposed cutting Russian banks from SWIFT. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, they did exactly that. Overnight, Russian financial institutions found themselves severed from the global payments infrastructure. The ruble crashed 40% within weeks. Russian foreign reserves, approximately $300 billion held in Western institutions, were frozen. President Vladimir Putin had spent years accumulating gold and reducing treasury holdings, preparing for this moment. It did not matter. The dollar system extends beyond paper currency. It encompasses the pipes through which global money flows. Control the pipes, control the world. This brings us to the most counterintuitive aspect of the dollar trap. American debt is not a weakness. It is the source of the trap's power. The United States currently carries approximately $35 trillion in national debt. Every rational analysis suggests this is unsustainable. Debt to GDP has exceeded 120%. Annual interest payments now exceed $870 billion, surpassing the defense budget. Yet global demand for treasury securities remains robust. Why? Because foreign nations have no alternative. The euro lacks the deep, unified bond market that treasuries provide. The European Union remains fragmented, each nation issuing its own debt. The Chinese yuan is not freely convertible. Beijing maintains capital controls that prevent large-scale foreign investment in Chinese assets. Gold cannot be printed to meet liquidity needs. Cryptocurrencies lack the stability and legal infrastructure required for sovereign reserves. The dollar wins not because it is perfect, but because every alternative is worse. America can run deficits that would destroy any other nation precisely because the world has no choice but to finance those deficits. The consequences extend beyond abstract finance. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, as it did aggressively in 2022 and 2023 to combat 8% inflation, the impact radiates globally. Emerging markets that borrowed in dollars, and approximately 83% of international trade is invoiced in dollars, suddenly face crushing repayment costs. The Sri Lankan economy collapsed in 2022, unable to service dollar-denominated debts as the currency strengthened. Pakistan, Egypt, Ghana, and Argentina all experienced severe financial distress. Their currencies weakened against the dollar, making imports more expensive, triggering inflation, triggering social unrest. American monetary policy becomes global monetary policy, whether the world consents or not. The Federal Reserve has one mandate: stable prices and maximum employment within the United States. The devastation its decisions cause in developing nations is simply not part of the calculation. Some nations are trying to build alternatives. China and Russia now settle much of their bilateral trade in yuan and rubles. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and new members including Iran, Egypt, and Ethiopia, have discussed creating alternative payment systems and possibly a shared currency. Saudi Arabia has signaled willingness to accept yuan for some oil sales, a crack in the petrodollar foundation. Yet these efforts face structural barriers. The yuan still represents less than 3% of global foreign exchange reserves. No alternative payment system matches SWIFT's network effects. Trust between BRICS nations remains fragile. India and China have unresolved border conflicts. Brazil's priorities differ from Russia's. Building a new financial architecture requires decades and stability that geopolitical rivalry prevents. The dollar system took 30 years to construct under American hegemony. Replicating it without a clear hegemon may prove impossible. What does the future hold? The dollar trap will likely persist for decades, but it is not immortal. History shows that reserve currency status eventually shifts. The British pound dominated the 19th century, the Dutch guilder before it, the Spanish real before that. Each transition took decades and accompanied major shifts in economic and military power. If China's economy continues growing, if America's political dysfunction undermines institutional credibility, if inflation erodes trust in Federal Reserve management, the trap may weaken. But weakness is not collapse. Even during the 2008 financial crisis, when American banks caused the worst global recession in 70 years, the dollar strengthened. Investors fleeing chaos sought safety, and safety still meant dollars. This is the final paradox of the trap. Even when America is the source of global financial destruction, the world runs toward America for protection. For those watching from within the United States, the trap offers a sobering lesson. American living standards, the ability to consume more than we produce, the capacity to run perpetual trade deficits, the freedom to print money during crises, all of this rests on a system that the world increasingly resents but cannot escape. When that resentment finds an outlet, when the alternatives finally mature, the adjustment will be severe. The privileges that feel permanent are historically temporary. The trap holds others, but it also creates dependencies that Americans rarely acknowledge. We have built an empire not of territories but of ledgers, not of armies but of debt instruments. Understanding this system is not pessimism, it is clarity, and clarity, in financial history, is the first step toward preparation. The world remains trapped in the dollar. The question you should ask is, what happens when the trap finally breaks?